Welcome to the Harvey B Gantt Center. I'm Angie Chandler. I manage educational initiatives and public programs, and on nights like this, we get to have really fun, innovative, interesting conversations with all of you amazing people. So we are an arts and culture center focused on African American art as well as African diaspora. So you can come here, you can find visual art, you can find performing arts, you can find conversations. We can talk about how few Black artists are in museum spaces. So right now it is my super pleasure to welcome these two ladies who have been sitting in the middle. And I love how y'all have been looking this way like it's not fabulousness and fur and here in the center of the room. I've been really excited to meet some amazing people in Charlotte, but these two ladies really bring me joy. And so we are so happy that this was an idea that existed. It came from Joni's brain. Joni, wave at the people. All right, so Joni Deutsch is the podcast manager at WFAE. The last time I announced her, that was not her title. So shout out to titles and promotions. So WFAE had so many podcasts, and podcasts are such a thing that they were like, what? We need someone to manage them. And then they were like, what? We need to have a contest and introduce two more. So you're going to hear some more about that. But everybody give a hand to Joni. We're so happy to have her here. She comes to us from West Virginia. She is a music lover. She's currently posting her song of the day. So check her IG stories for her song of the day. Some of them are local, some of them are just other songs, some are not. So she has a podcast called Amplifier. And she'll tell you some more about that. And then next to her, the third member of our Team Fabulous here, our hair team for tonight is Francine Marie. So Francine's voice may be familiar. Can you say hello?
Hello.
So Francine's face may not be familiar, but her voice is familiar, and she is a radio personality with Beasley Media down the street. So you have WFAE in the house, you have Beasley Media and all their many stations here. So again, there are folks in the room, have conversations, but Francine Marie does an amazing community radio show where she shares about all the things that organizations are doing around the city. She's also been in radio for years and has all the knowledge. But both of these ladies, besides being in radio, are also about that podcast life. So what they're going to talk to you about tonight, first, Joni's going to share a little bit about WFAE and their PodQuest.
So Francine, I think if you can flip the script just a little bit, I think actually if we could talk a bit about podcasting and what we do. So Francine, I don't know if you want to start and talk about a little bit about what you do with podcasting and then what I do and whatnot.
So I have a face for radio, how are you? But podcasters are pretty people, that's all I know. So I started in radio 23 years ago when they had reel to reel, razor blades. Yeah. I didn't know when I got into radio what they were doing. I thought they were doing cocaine. So I learned. But that's the beauty of it. So we're from two generations of radio, but the love of it, we have something in common. So my podcast, besides the Francine Marie show, that airs on 6 media stations in Charlotte, syndicated. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. I got into podcasting this year, and I said, oh, let's do it. And so what do I have? You have to do something that you have experience in, and mine is relationships. So the name of the show is Relationship ICU, because sometimes it needs intensive care. And we go to people's, you send us your issues, and we will answer them. So I'm an empty nester. My oldest is 41, my youngest is 24. So try that at home, ladies, 17 years apart. It could go either way. Yeah, so Relationship ICU is my podcast.
And about me, so I am originally from West Virginia, where I was born and raised, and I was doing podcasting there at the NPR station in the state of West Virginia, for the state of West Virginia. I was doing a music podcast about the West Virginia music scene, which people here may think of as being Bill Withers or Brad Beasley, very fair, but there's much more to the music scene in the entire state, and so that's what I did with one podcast. And I also worked with an NPR music show called Mountain Stage, which is a nationally syndicated program. It's been on the air for more than 30 years, wide variety of music, live performances, and I helped innovate their music podcast. because it's not as simple as just putting a broadcast and putting it on podcast platforms. Basically, two different audiences. Moved here to Charlotte about a little over a year ago, November 2017, to head WFAE, Charlotte's NPR station, 90.7's podcast initiatives. They really didn't do much podcasting beyond a straight radio broadcast to podcast of Charlotte Talks. Anyone a fan of Charlotte Talks in here? Daily? Okay, great. Wonderful, thank you. It's a daily talk show covering Charlotte's issues, topics, all that. So they wanted to do things for podcasts. Just a stat, but like approximately 73 million Americans, it's about 26% of the population over 12 years old, listen to podcasts. If you're not in the podcast game, but you want to, or you want to get in media, now is the best time to do so for so many reasons. Not just your content, not just your stories, and amplifying your community's ideas. It's also money too, money in the branding. Podcasts are getting a lot of it nowadays. So all that to say, a year or so ago, I was brought into WFAE to help lead their initiatives. Since November 2017, we've launched 4 podcasts. The first one was Southbound with Tommy Tomlinson, who's a Charlotte Observer critic. He now works with us at the station. It's a Southern interview podcast. We launched FAQ City, which is a podcast that answers the questions of Charlotteans. Someone asked us in the podcast from Charlotte, why is it called Uptown instead of Downtown? Another one was like, who is the Gold Man statue? What's his story? We covered a ton of different topics in the podcast. A third podcast we launched spring of last year was called She Says. She Says is a podcast about a sexual assault investigation. Took place in Mecklenburg County, and all the ups and a ton of downs that came with that investigation. In fact, the last episode of it dropped yesterday. And then the fourth podcast, and the latest one, is Amplifier. It's the music podcast about the Charlotte music scene that I host and produced. And it's been able to just explore the different parts of the Charlotte music scene, not just the singer-songwriters, but also people working behind the scenes. The next episode is going to be with DJ Fannie Mae, who's amazing. She works with the Charlotte Ballet. She's worked with the Mint Museum. She's probably done things for the Gantt. All that to say, the podcasts I help produce at WFAE, some of them have hit the top 200 of all podcasts on Apple. There's more than 600,000 podcasts on Apple. That's a ton of podcasts. They hit the top more than 1%. So I've learned a lot about podcasting, marketing content, more importantly, just how to amplify a local story from Charlotte or West Virginia to a national or international level. And so that's actually what I'm really excited about, is that you all are passionate about that same topic, and we'll be able to give you some tips and tricks along the way. I'm sorry I spoke a lot. I work in radio.
So Joni has launched a lot of radio shows. So who wants to launch one, and what advice do you have for them? Because it's almost like an author. Wrote a book, the book is sitting on the coffee table. You gotta market it.
Yeah, so, and I should mention too that we're going to do a Q&A. So if, we'll talk a little bit about our experience making podcast advice. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down, jot down the notes we give you. We'll have a little part at the end for that. But yeah, Francine, at the very beginning, people think, well, I have this great idea, I should make it a podcast, and you should. But the best podcasts aren't necessarily made because of a great idea, they're made because of the audience in mind. So let's say, for example, you want to put a spoon out there, you want to make a spoon, that's awesome, spoons are cool. But maybe that spoon is better suited for vanilla ice cream or cereal. What audience should you make it for? Is it for someone who maybe has a little issue picking up metal or wood? I mean, there's so many considerations in making a product for your audience. You might think it's the best thing in the world, but if you don't know who your audience is, or where they are, or how they engage with the product, I mean, it's like you're just putting out things in the wind and hoping something catches it and flies it away to the best audience. So my biggest advice when it comes to podcasting and creating a show, or any kind of product for that matter, is that you know who your audience is and what they want. So think of it broadly. You have an idea, you want to make a podcast about dogs. I like dogs, I'm sorry. A dog podcast. Well, is that podcast going to be for someone who owns a small dog, a big dog, a medium dog? Is it for people who want to have a fun time with dogs, a serious conversation about dogs, science about dogs? Are they young, old? Do they attend college? Do they live in a certain neighborhood? Do they only have enough time for 10 minutes worth of content because they're driving to and from work? Or do they want like an investigative podcast about dogs that's an hour long and sound rich? Which here means just there's a ton of music and audio involved. There's so many things to consider. So number one thing I just recommend when you want to launch a podcast is who is that audience and what do they want from you? And what is the unique thing that you can offer to them?
And my advice for a podcast is that you have to be so dedicated. So you have this great idea, like Joni said. Will it fly? Will it not? Does this only sound good in your head? Run it by a couple of people. Don't be offended if they say no or they don't like it. It's okay. It's your show. But do a little research on what shows are already out there, what hasn't been done, what needs to be done, what answers need to be addressed, what problems. Everybody has problems. So if it's problem solving, it will definitely work. Big advice. If you're going in as a team, make sure you almost have the same lifestyle. Because if I've got an empty nester situation, so I could probably do a show with Joni because she only has a puppy, right? But if she had 5 kids, I might not be able to match. It's no offense. So find someone compatible to your lifestyle and then the hours that you can work, and who can edit better. Who can edit better? That can make or break a show. What music are you going to use that you have a license for? You can buy some music and use it. I get the luxury of using Bruno Mars on my show and a couple of other things because Beasley Media owns a couple of things, so I'm kind of protected. But I still could get sued. You have to really watch that copywriting thing, and I need to do a show with the copywriting library folks.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. Just piggyback off that, copyright. Just because you feel like you can take an image or an audio clip somewhere doesn't mean that you can legally use it. If you, just a pro tip, if you're wanting to use music or photo or whatever in your podcast for whatever reason, you need to make sure that you can get it, that is legal. If you type in, I think, like free music bed, legal music bed into Google, you'll find a library of music resources that are free. Some require you to just say audio credit, Bruno Mars, whatever. Others say you don't need to credit us, just go ahead and use it. Mileage may vary on how great the music sounds. Some may sound like, Muzak in like an elevator. But it is legal, you will not be sued. So that's great to know. I agree with what Francine said about teamwork. With podcasting, it is so difficult because you're basically your own entrepreneur. You're your own marketer and producer and host. You feel like you need to do everything. It's almost like a nonprofit in a way. You need to do twice as much work, 3 times as much work, but without that much credit, without that many resources. And just know that there are other people out there that can help you. You just need to reach out. You need to use social media or look at meetups or groups and just try to find someone that can help you that has a same kind of content goal in mind. It's going to lighten your load a lot. If you're great at hosting, but you're not that great at sound design or editing, someone can help you with that. When it comes to marketing, which I could talk about podcast marketing all day, every day, a number of considerations. Again, it goes back to your audience. When you know who your audience is, then you know what kind of media that you can target towards them so they know about your podcast. For instance, She Says, the true crime podcast that we did that launched last summer that hit the top 200 of all podcasts. There's a reason it hit the top 200, besides the fact it was a great piece of audio. We made sure to market the H out of it. We made sure to reach out to other true crime podcasts locally and nationally to ask them for cross promo. It is so simple and free. If you find another podcast locally, nationally, wherever, or digital content, that you can say, hey, we'll be happy to mention you in our podcast or product in exchange for you mentioning in yours. Because they share audiences, right? A true crime audience fan in Nebraska is likely going to listen to another true crime podcast, even if it's based in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's just how it is. So really knowing who your audience is, you can find out, well, if they subscribe to this email newsletter or they go to the Gantt Center, then work with the Gantt Center. Work with a nonprofit that caters to that same audience. If you get in their email newsletter, you can do a pop-up event with them or live taping the podcast with them. That's just a perfect mix, and it's not going to cost you that much money. It could even be entirely free. So big recommendations there. I probably can talk about marketing more, but I'm going to give the mic over to Francine.
So microphones, equipment. So who has Odyssey 123? I think it's Odyssey. It's a free software. Odyssey 123. You can download it online. You have it.
I just downloaded it.
Okay. It's free, it's good, it's awesome. Adobe 3. I think we use 3.0. What do we use, Kevin? Kevin was my intern at one time.
No, I think it's
6.0, anyway. They keep coming out with these new ways, these new software, so you have to keep up with it. So, but that means that you have to have maybe Adobe Suite that you pay monthly for. So you have the video editing and you have the audio editing and all that good stuff. I wanted to touch on pictures really quick. So Beasley Media Group, right, they have so much money. Someone was blogging. That's a big thing for us. We have to blog. Someone loaded up a picture and we didn't have rights to it. And so the person's, what was it, $50,000? Yeah. So you gotta really watch what you post. These pictures you have to give credit to the person in the picture, from the picture, permission for the picture. It's a big deal now. You can sit at home and not work and just have sue people because they use your picture. So back to audio, equipment, you need a good mic. Oh my God, you need a good mic. So the biggest tip I can give, so I teach at the Carolina School of Broadcasting as well. That wasn't a lady like, was it? So if you're doing one mic, you can do the show with one mic. So, welcome to the show, Joni. She waited! She waited till I put the mic in front of her mouth.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Right? Because that's the biggest mistake. Good morning, thank you for joining us. And then you start talking. You're not on the mic. So it's just the little things in life. So for a 1-hour show that I do, is normally cut up into 4 segments, 10 minutes, 15 seconds, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on the person. Please pick the right person to be your guest. Don't use aunties and uncles. Don't do it. They will let you down. They will let you down. Because, at the family reunion, they're like this. Right, when you get them on, yes.
Yeah, guests are key. When I'm helping, as a podcast manager at WFAE, I oversee a number of podcasts of different types of guests. Southbound is more southern, Amplifier is all music-based. When we figure out like what guest goes at what time. It's very important to know what your schedule is going to be for podcasting. Are you releasing a podcast every day? Good luck to you. Although daily podcasts are big right now. Daily podcast is going to be a weekly podcast every Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday, which, by the way, I recommend those 3 days as the days that you do for podcasting on a weekly basis. Is it bi-weekly? Once every other week? Is it monthly? Wouldn't really recommend monthly, because the whole point is you want to create an audience that's coming with you each day or each week. Think of it as TV shows, right? You know that a TV show, The Bachelor, is going to be on this day at this time every week. And if they're not at that time or day, they will let you know in advance so you don't freak out. You need to consider that. You need to make sure you're consistent in the timing of the podcast, whatever it's going to be. And when it comes to guests then, look at your calendar and say, okay, so I'm trying to book out for 2 months, and one of the episodes is going to be in February. It's going to be around Valentine's Day. Maybe that's a great opportunity to do a Valentine's themed one, or a love one, or an anti-love podcast, because Valentine's Day is sometimes not about love. Really considering that, because then when that podcast comes up in the people's feeds, it's going to be so timely to something going on in their day or their week. Just to go back to what Francine was saying about audio software, a big thing to know is that podcasting is what you make it. If you want podcasting to be your full-time project that you're going to try to get money out of, it's going to be your job, then invest in it. Invest in the equipment. Invest in the microphones that you're using, soundproofing the room that you're in, which, by the way, if you want to do a quick and easy soundproofing, put a blanket over your head as you're recording. Or a jacket. Seriously, yeah. That's what NPR does sometimes. If they're remote in a hotel room, they will put a blanket over their head. That's NPR. But really invest in it. Now granted, if you just want to make this a passion project right now, there are a lot of free resources out there. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, they have podcasting kits that you can check out from the library. That's awesome. I think they're probably on a wait list right now because of how you dance. Yeah, but otherwise, there's free resources for that. There are podcasting studios around Charlotte at co-working spaces. Hygge, Hygge, they have one. Advent Co-working, yep, they have another. So look into them. I think they rent them out by the hour. I don't know their rates exactly. And for audio editing software, there's a number of free programs out there. Reaper, like the Grim Reaper, REAPER is one. Audacity, AUDI, you can spell the rest, is another. But if you want to do Adobe, which is something that we both use, it's an amazing program. You can go crazy with the sound effects in it. So again, really consider, is this going to be something you want to invest your time, resources, and lives in? And if it's not there yet, if you don't want to invest that much into it, you can still do it for cheap or for almost free. So just know what your priorities are before you get into it.
And if you're going to have guests for your show, how many people will have guests? You will have guests. So you're going to find a really cool place to have these guests, right? So if you have them over to the home, clean it up! Right? Just have a dedicated space, that's all I'm saying. Have a dedicated space. I have the luxury of having a studio, but when I was doing traffic reports during layoffs, I would use my closet. That was my studio because the clothes was the boundary, right? It's like, I'm reporting live right here. So that's cool. So depending on where you are, depending on who you can have over to your space, because you always want to leave that good reputation. You want other people to be clamoring to get on your show. Mark Maron. Joni can tell you about Mark Maron, the man that has a podcast in his garage that President Barack Obama, right, he's pulling up. So target who you want ahead of time. I normally take my shows and plan them out 2 months in advance just because. I just can't do the fly-by-night. I just can't do it. And sometimes I miss out on some really good interviews. Are you going to do phoners? Phoners are where you don't have the folks in the studio. I do not. I'm just not a fan of phoners. I will do it with White House officials only because they have really good landlines. You can't trust people's landlines. You can't do it. It's crackly. It's horrible. If you wasted your time and spent your... Yeah, anyway, I can digress.
Alternatives to, I mean, phoner's great. We have a really great studio with great microphones and setup, so we could do it so that you almost feel like the person's in the room with us. You don't even know that they're like in a different country. If you want to, you could use Skype. You can record through Skype. I would double check though. I don't want to say something incorrectly, but I think with Skype, if you do use that audio, you do have to mention it somewhere in your audio to say like, we recorded this interview through Skype. Just double check on that. But are those like video calling services, like the audio is pretty decent. Not amazing based off my ears, but like I can tell the difference because I work in audio, but it's good enough. You could also do voice memos, which brings me to my next thing, which is audience engagement and really encouraging a community around your podcast. There are Facebook groups devoted to podcasts that have like millions of followers. There are websites, and anyone here know about Reddit, R-E-D-D-I-T, the big social media platform? There are subreddits, pages devoted to topics about podcasts, or podcasts themselves. Don't go to the serial subreddit, because that's like a black hole of armchair detectives. But building an audience is so important, because then that really connects you to the audience even further, so that you can do live events with them, so you can get sponsorships. But more than that, it just feels like a true connection. People are advocating for you to win and succeed and make even more podcasts. So when it comes to engagement with the audience, I would recommend a few different things. As you're starting out, social media is really great to have. Letting your friends and family know about it, and also encouraging them, as soon as the podcast launches, to subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it. Apple algorithms are really weird, and if you're able to get a swell of support in the first 2 weeks of your podcast when it launches, it really helps it get to the charts. So really encourage that. When you are making the podcast and you're producing it, consider putting a message in the center of the podcast, which is called, in our case, the mid-roll. Put a message in there and say, hey folks, thank you so much for listening. Just a reminder, this podcast is for you and we want to hear from you. So send us an email, tweet at us, leave us a rating or review, and then close that feedback loop by saying, yes, and we're going to mention on the next podcast if you let us know what you say. So in the next podcast episode, you're going to be able to say, okay, listener Amy from Charlotte said, I really like dogs. Thanks for doing a podcast about dogs. That's great. We want to hear from the next listener. Let us know. We'll put you in the next podcast episode. When you do that, it's letting the audience know it's not just them putting their voice out into the wild and no one's responding or listening. You're actually saying, we are reading, we are listening to you, and you're actually in the podcast right now. And then also, I'll just say, like, growing and making sure that if you're seeing